We are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Heart to Heart with Bree. Tonight we'll be talking about the World Cup final. I'd like to welcome Coach Andrew and the Emperor. Please introduce yourselves to the viewers.
So as I like to say, I am the Emperor. When I was born, they didn't know who I was, so they called me Richard Core. I'm a USSFB licensed soccer coach, a licensed referee, a former collegiate player, parish champion with Mandela FC out of Portland, and I played for a few years in the Bronx, New York International Soccer League. And I am an ardent football fanatic.
Coach Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew Edwards here, popularly called Coach for short, or called by those people who went to Kitchfield High School with me. Been coaching since 1996, former national under 20 and under 17 coach, assistant under 23 with the JFF. I'm technical director of the Turks and Caicos Islands Football Association, coach educator with the JFF, CONCACAF, and FIFA.
I'd like to say welcome, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I have to ask you, did the right team win the final?
Well, I don't know if there was a right or a wrong team, but, genuinely the team that
Say that again?
I don't know that there's a right or a wrong team, but I genuinely believe that the team that played the better football, the more positive football, front foot football, had control of the game. And the most consistent team over the course of the tournament won the game. That's all I would say.
Coach Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with Emperor. There's no wrong or right team in the World Cup, or in football for that matter. But I am always in support of the team that plays positive with the intention to win. And to be quite frank, I have supported Argentina many times in the past, cried profusely when they lost in 1990 to Germany. But this time around, I did not have any support for them any at all. And that's largely because, for the most part, I think they were, I was reading a statistics this morning.
There seems to be some technical difficulty with.
I was reading a statistics this morning that said Argentina is the one of the 48 teams in the world, and that is amazing when you think of the fact that they have committed the most fouls in the World Cup. For that reason and that reason only, I did not support them.
Okay, it looks as if Coach Andrew is having some technical problems. Okay, he's back. Okay. Okay, Andrew, go ahead.
I'm not sure what you heard, but I was saying that, I was saying that, I would have supported Argentina in the past in World Cup, particularly 1986, 1990, when Brazil got knocked out. They were the team that I gave my support to. But this World Cup, I just didn't support them. And that came down largely to the fact that I think they were being treated too preferentially. There's a statistic I saw this morning that showed that they are the only team that has not
Andrew's having some technical problems. Can you connect to your modem? Because I think that will give you a better connection.
In the World Cup, and yet still there are the team that commit.
Yeah, I think what he's trying to say, I could pick up what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that they are the only team in the World Cup that has not had a VAR decision gone against them. I kind of pick up that that's what he's trying to say, but he's clearly having some technical
Yeah.
difficulties with his audio there.
Okay. Yeah. You know, after that game they played against Egypt, I really lost. They were never one of the teams that I particularly cared for, but you know, that game with Egypt left a bad taste in my mouth, you know, and you know, just saw some dirty football from them and I wasn't impressed. That's just me though. I know there's a lot of supporters and I know their hearts are broken right now, but I am just very happy that you know Spain won the game. Would you like to go ahead and give us a recap of the game and you know whatever it is that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I see what a lot of people were saying about that, and I never really ever wanted to give that side of things too much airtime, because if we are to be honest,
Yeah.
it's not like the referees, put the ball in the back of the net for them or gave them penalties. I'm not saying that some of the decisions clearly looked a little bit, off color, but I always want to focus more on the football. And if I'm to be
Yes.
honest, like 7 minutes into the game today, I took my pen and grabbed a notepad and started to jot some stuff down because I'm wondering if this is going to be a pattern developing, that will dominate the airwaves again in terms of because when I saw in the 7th minute when I think Rodri was married through midfield, breaking the lines and being pushed like 2 or 3 times by the same player. One time even had 2 hands in his back, and the referee didn't call it. And that same ball broke to I think Ayasabal and the top of the 18, and I thought it was a clear foul, and he still didn't call it. And going the other end, there was a touch, in Messi's back, and he called that. So I'm like, that didn't look too right. So, I grabbed my pen and a notepad just to take notes of those moments to see if, this is going to be one of those games that people talk about that type of stuff more than the football that was on display. I mean, fortunately for us, I believe the football, it wasn't the most exciting game of the tournament so far. But, fortunately, we didn't have too many more of those incidents to talk about, so, and as I'm watching as the awards are being handed out now, and to see that young kid Kubarsi got the young player of the tournament award. Like,
Great.
Honestly, we talk about Lamine Yamal, and oftentimes I remember a kid saying to me the one time he came to me to train, he wanted to get into the combines, and he's like he wants to be a number 10, like despite all the other qualities that he had that I thought could have been much more beneficial in other areas of the pitch. And he goes, no, coach, my dad tells me either be a goalkeeper, a number 10, or a striker, because those are the statistics that people look at, and I'm like, wow. And this was a young kid at the time. So to see, a defender, a kid, no less, playing as a defender and being recognized in that way is really, it's really, refreshing to see. As Coach Andrew quite clearly keep having difficulty and going in and out. Yeah, I'll take that up, to give my recap of the game. It's clear that Spain brought that same dominance to the game that they dispatched France with in the semifinal. I was surprised when they won the semifinal against France, not just the fact that they won it, but the manner in which they won it, the dominant manner in which they won it, the way they negated Spain. Negated France's, frightening attack, and I said after that game when we were on that, look, if Spain brought anything like they brought to that France game, they will be world champions. It was just because, and Coach Andrew made the point last time we were on too, that they don't concede goals throughout this whole tournament.
Right.
Argentina didn't have a shot on goal until the start of extra time. I think like 118 minutes in or something like that. That's unheard of. We're talking about a team that has Lionel Messi in it, Julian Alvarez. That's your front two. And to go 118 minutes without having a shot of any kind is remarkable achievement by the whole Spain team, not just the back four.
Yes.
Because it was a monstrous performance by Rodri and Fabian Ruiz in midfield. I will say as well, in the past, for example, in the England game, we saw where Argentina were able to put forward substitutes on. In this game, it was kind of the reverse. Some of it was forced upon them. You had players going down injured and had to be replaced. But then we see straight away after the extended halftime break, which that's very unheard of. They came out, players were struggling. They had to make another change, defensive change again in that area. So in the past, where they were able to add to their attack in a game where they were down to 10 men and needed a goal, they couldn't bring Lautaro Martinez off the bench. They had to be bringing, a defensive player off the bench. They brought Simeone off the bench because, of the work rate that he puts in. They're down to 10 men. Messi's not going to give you much off the ball, in a defensive sense. They had to take Rodrigo de Paul off, who's normally their engine in midfield. So, it was they were up against it in this game, as opposed to, games in the past when,
Yes.
it was the evening they were chasing it, have their full complement of players and could make the substitutions to affect the game. Today, it wasn't one of those days. The substitutions were forced upon them and they were largely defensive. But credit again to Spain. I'm not trying to take anything away from Spain because from the get-go, they were the team on the front foot, possessing the ball and stifling Argentina's any ability to retain any form of meaningful possession and playing forward.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what rating would you give this World Cup?
Wow. This World Cup, I wouldn't rank it very highly compared to other World Cups. I mean, it was historical in the sense that it was the largest World Cup. It was hosted by 3 countries. We had some good football on display. Not very often. This is only the second time the World Cup final has gone to a 0-0 scoreline and getting into extra time. Fortunately, it didn't go to penalty this time like the last time that happened. But, there's just so much around this World Cup that we as football fans aren't used to, and if some of these things remain in football, we might get used to some of them. And I'm talking about the breaking the game up into 4 quarters, call it hydration break if you want. But
Yeah.
broke the game up
It's
into
4 quarters, yeah.
right. And especially in today's game with this extended halftime show,
Because remember, before we went live, I asked you, is it just me? I don't remember anything like this before in a World Cup.
Yeah,
Right.
it has never happened before. So these are things that we're not necessarily used to in the game. So, if they stay in the game, I'm not sure if IFAB or FIFA will keep them in the game. I mean, each governing body have their own ways within FIFA rules to set up their tournaments, so they want to set them up. But IFAB make the rules which govern the sport. So if IFAB decides to keep these things in the game, then, eventually we will have to get used to them because that's the way change works. But, saying that and all the other noise, outside of the field, the political temperature, the unfair treatment that some of the players, especially the team from Senegal, had to deal with by being stopped and searched on the tarmac, the referee that wasn't let in, the African referee that wasn't let in, the Iranian team that was just treated so unfairly, having to leave the country, hours after playing a game, only coming in a certain time before the game. Ghana, who didn't have the ability to call on, their leader and, central midfield player for one of the games up in Canada. So there's just all these things that really diminishes the experience for us purist football fans. We don't want to see that in the World Cup. In the World Cup, we just want to see great football playing. And, there was too much in this World Cup that, for me, this World Cup, it's probably one of the worst I've seen since I've started watching the World Cup so avidly. Started with the World Cup in Mexico in 1986. I rate it very lowly. I would say probably a 5, if not a 4.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but it kind of gave some Super Bowl vibes. Now, I'm not against the Super Bowl. I'm just not. I grew up watching what we call football. So I've never really gotten into American football. So the whole Super Bowl and all of that, it's not for me. And I just felt like I prefer how things were before, and I hope that it will just go back to what it's always been. That's just my take. Now, who do you think was the best player?
Well,
Or
I
do
mean,
you have several people in mind?
yeah, as we are doing this live right now, the awards are being presented, and
Okay.
I could see that they gave the golden ball to Rodri. The golden ball is normally reserved for the best player throughout the tournament. You know, prior to seeing that, and I don't have any argument against that because he has been the leader of that team, the midfield linchpin of that team. He's the one that you know stops teams like France in the semifinal, and certainly Argentina here alongside his partner in crime, Fabian Ruiz. And he's the one that links the defense and the attack, throughout the whole tournament for Spain. So no arguments against that at all. But I will give an honorable mention to Kylian Mbappe, and not just
Yeah.
because he scored 10 goals. Certainly that is a monumental feat because prior to that, I think 8 was the most in any one tournament, and he's, added 2 more to that in this one tournament, and also now becomes the leading scorer all time in World Cup history,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Surpassing Lionel Messi's 20 goal with his 21, right? In half the amount of World Cups. So, and not just the goals, like I said, I felt like when he's clicking, France are clicking. He brought a certain energy to France. And don't get me wrong, he plays in a front four with, Dembele and Barcola and Olise, or Doe, if not Barcola, and that is frightening. Those are 4 really, really good, quick, skillful players. But especially in the game against Spain, where you will see that he was off it a little bit. France looked off it.
Yeah.
All 4 of them looked off it. But whenever he's on, it's just a different energy.
Definitely.
It's a really different energy. So I would give him honorable mention. But as I'm, glancing through the corner of my eyes, seeing Rodri coming up now to raise the World Cup trophy, and seeing he got the golden ball earlier, and reflecting on his presence in the center of the park for Spain, his leadership, undoubtedly.
I was about to say he showed great leadership.
So yeah, I think deservedly he is the best player of the tournament.
And you know what? I definitely agree with that. I'd like to welcome Fakita. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, now it's back to the drawing board for all the teams. This is a time. Is this the time that teams? Because I know the cup is now. It's officially over now, and I know now we have 4 more years. Is this the time now? Do they start as early as now to start planning for the next cup? And the possibilities of winning and what they need to do.
I genuinely want to, especially as I'm wearing my Jamaica shirt for the first time, right, on this show. And as you're asking the question, and I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about nations like Jamaica and
Yes,
Trinidad, and our smaller nations in the CONCACAF region, and even some of the African countries, not just the smaller ones that came like Cape Verde and made a nice,
right.
Some of the bigger countries who've been knocking on the door. I genuinely feel like we need to do more than just start thinking about the World Cup cycle. For teams like Spain and France, the established teams who have won it and won it numerous times, who's always been in the top 4 or top 8 of the World Cup. Yes, for them, it's okay looking at the next cycle because they've already had their production line in play, right? They've already set up their infrastructure. They've already set up their long-term plan. They've already put their coaching philosophy in place from their grassroots level, and every player and coach being educated in their system already attuned with those systems, right? Knowing what the long-term goal is in terms of 10, 15, or 20 years, have the facilities in place, the coaching methods in place, disseminating that from the grassroots level. Those bigger countries, they already have that, which is why they're always at the top. I feel like for smaller countries like us here in this region and our African brothers and sisters, I feel it needs to be more than that. I'm not just looking at the World Cup cycle. I think we need to start having those long-term plans, right, put in place, and having that thought process that, okay, I might be leading this federation right now, but for this country to be established in football and starts to reap the benefits of something meaningful, the plan needs to be longer than a 4-year cycle. The plan needs to be more than just the World Cup, especially in countries like ours where there's not a professional setup, right? So we need to start thinking of how can we exploit or do better at the amateur level setups that we have, right?
Yes.
The Olympics, for example, right? It's an amateur sport, but it's a very big sport. A lot of countries take that route to establish themselves and to garner support and to know what it feels like to win. And it is a global title if you win an Olympic title.
Yes,
so
it
I
is.
do believe that for countries like ours, it shouldn't necessarily just be, okay, let's start the plan for the next World Cup, right? Because it just becomes cyclical and nothing, long-term that everybody understands and is bought into and works their way toward.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that. Norman Johnson says Jamaica is a long way off. Yeah. I would say the men's team for sure. They're definitely a long way off, and it's been refreshing to see how far the women's game has come in Jamaica. But yeah, I mean, 4 years goes by quickly, so I am hoping that whoever is in charge of the Jamaican Federation, that they have some plans, or they're, because, it's, I would love to see the Jamaican men at the next World Cup. I would love to see that.
Listen, I agree with Sister Norma. You said, who said that? Made that
It says Norman Johnson, yes.
Norman Johnson. I sincerely agree, right? And I feel that we have to stop skirting that fact because we think we're better than we are, right? We don't have facilities. When we go back to Jamaica and see the facilities that they're playing football in, even the so-called bigger or better facilities, they're underrated. High school facilities here, recreational facilities here, and in other countries that are more established are top-notch to the best facilities that we have in our country.
That's a shame.
Right. So we need to stop skirting around the facts and know that we really aren't. We're far off it. Way, way, way off it. And it's because, again, we don't think long-term. And because when we find ourselves in position of leadership, we want to be the one to bring everything to fruition. We don't, for example, I'm a Garveyite. I'm a staunch Garveyite. And when you read Garvey, right, one of the things Garvey is, you see constantly in Garvey, he talks about the next 50 to 100 years and things that we need to do to make sure that the next 50 to 100 years, we can be self-reliant. We can be, prosperous, right? We can be people with respect, right? We can be equitable. 50 to 100 years. Those are always the long-term targets that Garvey set and talks about things in those block of years. So we're elected for a 4 or 5 year cycle, and we want to do everything in 4 or 5 years, right? We don't have the resources and the facilities to do things in 4 or 5 years. When I listen to some of the people, right, who are responsible, like for example, like right now, and I'm just being honest, the guy who's responsible for coaching education in Jamaica right now is a guy that has no football experience at all, no coaching experience or coaching education. Yes. Chase Roberts from Litchfield High School. I know him to be a school challenge guy. And he is responsible for coaching education in Jamaica. How you are going to set any form of program for something you know nothing about. And I'm not trying to bemean the young man.
No, I get where you're coming
He's
from.
a bright, smart person, right? But you have nothing to call on in that regard. So how are we going to compete with a Spain? How are we going to compete with a Trinidad and Tobago, let alone a Curacao, let alone? Right? When the person who's supposed to be responsible for educating the coaches knows nothing about the game. What is he going to set a plan to educate the coaches in?
Wow.
So yeah, we are off it, and we're off it by more than a country mile. So I agree with your listener that made that comment.
Wow. My next question is for those who may have to walk away from the beautiful game. And I'm thinking about Ronaldo, those who they're getting older. It's not realistic to think of them coming back to another World Cup. How difficult is it to transition from being a player?
For those it's difficult. Let me say that it is extremely difficult for a lot of players, more than we might think. And right now, there are people who have set up systems, institutions, businesses to help players transition. Let's think about this. So Messi is now 39 years old,
Okay.
right? We know Messi from Messi was a young child taken from Argentina to Spain, right? Because we all know that he's had his challenges with his health, right? We all know it's widely spoken about that he's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, right? So he's been put in special programs in Spain from he was young. We knew about him from he was young. We saw him took the Youth World Cups by storm from he was very young. This is all he knows. This is all he knows. So now at 39, you're saying you're done. Everything that you know, you can't do it anymore, right? Not on the levels that you were used to doing it. 39 is still, youthful. If any person in their normal profession, let's just say a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher, or, a, high school principal or whatnot, were retired at 39, and that's all you knew. You have a long life ahead of you. And if at 39, you have to retire from your profession, that's a hard transition to make to something else, because now you're going to have to learn something else at 39, right? And I say this for most, because what happens is you find a lot of these players, some of them starts to transition into coaching as they get into, the latter stages of their career. It's not for everyone. Some of them starts to transition into punditry, right? It's not for everyone, right? Some of them have investments. We could see with, for example, Flamini, right? Flamini that used to play for Arsenal. He's now a billionaire, right? Because he transitioned into, I think, vodka or something like that. He invested in, and he's now a multi-billionaire, right? So players do transition and do invest in different stuff while they're coming towards the end of their career. But there are tons and tons and tons of players, including in our homeland Jamaica. Like, how many times have we seen where they are, reaching out and starting GoFundMe's, or just reaching out, appealing for assistance for our brothers and sisters who played for the country, who have fallen on our times, who are not doing well with their health, who are just not doing well with, their living standards, right? And they know nothing else but football. So it is a very, very difficult transition. I mean, people like Messi and Ronaldo, the ones you mentioned, they more than likely will be okay.
Yeah.
They're the top tier, in our sport, and they've been for some time, but there are a lot of players, who are playing in the same teams with these players, who might not find that transition so seamless.
Yeah.
We might struggle to make that transition when their playing time comes to an end. So it is a really difficult transition to make.
I thought of this question because, as I was watching England, well, every game that England played, and they would show David Beckham, and I would say to myself, like, I wonder how it feels for him to be watching the game. Like, does he go through wishing he could still be out there being a part of the action when you played on such a high level and then you become a spectator, you're no longer out there playing? I mean, how tough of a transition is that?
Oh, that is very, very difficult, and I mean, these guys, myself included, whenever we get an opportunity to go and kick the ball, we still take it. It's not the same, like when you were younger and playing, but I mean, you love it so much, those guys, they go back and they play in their Legends games or their charity games, or whatnot, like myself, we have our little kickabouts when we can, I still play in some tournaments when I can.
Okay.
Well, it's nothing like when we were younger, and this is what you do, and you get up every day and you train for it and you look forward to it and you plan for it and you prepare for it. It's a difference, but again, people like Beckham, fortunate enough to be able to transition into other meaningful ways of earning a living. There are many people, including some of his own teammates, when we think of even the great Paul Gascoigne, he's one that, struggles a lot,
Yeah.
not just with his finances, but with his health,
Yeah. Yeah,
with his
I
addiction.
think it's sad. I think, I think that, and I'm sure that now there are advisors in place, but I think when you get to that point where your career is winding down, to have a game plan, not just financial, but like what will you do with your time? But especially those who made really great money and then, all of a sudden they're broke. I've always found it hard to be sorry for them because I'm like, you made all this money and you just blew it. But I get it. Not everyone is great with finances, but I do think that, like I said, it has to be tough to watch the game and you think about the glory days, and looking back, I guess that would have to be hard. Now I have to ask you about the up and coming players, the ones that took advantage of being on the world's biggest stage. um, who do you think will gain some club signings or a bigger paycheck opportunity?
Well, the good thing about this is that that is a category that most of the younger players and lower paid players will fortunately find themselves in, right? Because now you have the World
Yes.
Cup on your resume, right? And especially players like Kubarsi, we just saw one that there. I mean, Lamine Yamal, these are already top, young players, right? They are in the elite group of young players already. But we've seen like players like Boyadi of Morocco and Diamande of the Ivory Coast, right? While these are players who just stood out there as young players in a year, some crazy money is being bandied about already with some of the top European teams. But I believe that because we think of the Real Madrids and the Barcelonas and the Arsenal and Man United and the top teams, right? Um, but there are so many different leagues around the
Yes.
world, right, that are looking for players. So somebody playing, for example, in Cape Verde right now, Vazinia, right? I don't remember what his club team is, but I'm sure if there are club teams now looking for a goalkeeper, and they're
Yeah.
probably reaching out to his team to say, hey, what's his availability?
Yeah. Yeah.
Other players within the squad, the Curacao squad, for example, like, I mean, everybody has an opportunity now to step up a level from where they were, even in terms of the contracts that they had, the clubs they were playing for, because you've had that World Cup experience under your belt. So the world is seeing you. So, I mean, it's not just the top teams and the top leagues in the world. There are leagues all over this world, including in this region. There's the MLS here. There are a few different leagues below the MLS even. There's the Mexican League, the Brazilian League, Argentina, Canada. I mean, there's football being played right around the world. And now that these players have had an opportunity to strut their stuff to everybody watching right around the world,
Yeah.
they all have an opportunity now to negotiate better terms for themselves, or for people from the outside looking in to come and inquire about their availability.
That's good, and I'm hoping for a lot of them that they will get what they're looking for. Now, as this World Cup has come to an end, and before we know it'll be time for the various leagues for their seasons to begin. How long does it take these players to recuperate from the wear and tear of this World Cup?
Well, I can tell you right now, these players that we just watched in the final, they are going to take a whole lot longer than the players who exited, let's say, at the first round stage, right? Some of them
Yeah.
are probably already start to incorporate themselves back into their club teams. You're going to need at least 2-3 weeks just to do nothing, right? You're going to, I mean, these three Arsenal players who are World Cup champions now, Marino and Zubimendi and David Raya, Arteta is going to give them a few extra weeks off to go and enjoy that time with
Yeah.
their family. They never had it, right?
Right.
And you come back, now you're going to have to rebuild your fitness from the ground up, right? So it is going to take quite a while, especially for these Argentinian and Spain players to reintegrate themselves back into their club teams. And even the England players and France players who played in the fourth place match last night, they are going to need some extra time as well. They all will, but the ones who go further will need more time, but it's going to be a while before we see any of these players who at least made it to the Final Four in any of their club teams.
Now, what's the process for them to recuperate and, rejuvenate and all of that? Do they have to get like special massages, or, I mean, what is it that they do?
Oh yeah,
I know their bodies took a beating.
Yeah, that is constant. They get that on a regular basis. You have masseuses traveling with these teams right now. You have masseuses traveling with them. You have their physical therapists traveling with them. You have their psychologists traveling with them. So it's not like, this don't happen on a continuous basis and now I need to go and get this done. It is a continual thing. But to answer your question specifically, now it's downtime. Right now it's family time, vacation, holiday. People are going to go on their vacation, go on their holiday, spend time with their family, and just decompress away from it all. Once that's done, then it's going to be a slow build up to get back to certain levels of fitness. So to my earlier point, we won't see any of these players probably in the opening few weeks of the Premier League or La Liga. Okay. These players will need time to first just relax and enjoy time with their friends and family, and then time to start to build up back to their fitness. And this is going to include now the nutrition regime, because you're going away on holiday. Yes, they are professionals and they're probably watching what they eat and drink, but not so much so, given that.
But not when they're on holiday, right?
So they're going to enjoy themselves a little bit. So it's going to take some time for them to build up back to the levels that are required to put their bodies through another 78 months of rigors every few days.
For the last few weeks, we've watched some really great football. I'd like you to share some of the highs and lows that you experience watching the matches.
Well, something, albeit third place game, but the game yesterday, I enjoyed that game between France and
in England, yes,
because it's reminiscent to me of when I used to watch the Brazilian teams in the 80s, 90s, and the clips I've seen of the ones in the 70s and earlier on. It's just this free flowing, expansive front foot football. And as I'm watching that, I'm thinking to myself, wow, maybe if the England team played like this against Argentina, because there was a lot of transition moments, counter-attacking moments where they were coming from deep in their own half of the field, but they recover position and they had, a Bukayo Saka on one side and a Marcus Rashford on the other side, who's got speed, who's got skill, who's got power. And, Ivan Toney going through the middle. They had Eze catching up through the middle. So these players with their pace and power and skills looked so good in those transition moments, when they're breaking at pace. And it had me thinking, wow, this is some of the criticisms I hear a lot leveled at the coach. He went so defensive, myself included. I thought he went way too defensive,
right,
with no outlet at all. And there were a couple of moments. I think it was the third goal was one of those moments where they went from back to front quickly through Rashford, cutting it back for Saka, right? And that was an entertaining game to watch. And because first half, it was 4-0 to England.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, France showed up to the party.
Yes, they did. They woke up.
No, it's not like that. We got some skills too. We know how to play too. And boy, was it a treat to watch.
It really and truly was. And I was saying that to myself, like, where was this when you played Argentina? Yeah. But it was entertaining. And
I will say, I give a lot of credit in there as well. I remember sending messages between my brothers and I was watching when England won the penalty, right? Jed Spence again was really tremendous. He was awesome. And when Jude took the ball, right, he had an opportunity to break a record by taking that penalty, but he elected to pass it up to Saka.
I thought
he also had the opportunity to break a record, right, scoring a hat trick, right? And I thought, wow, that was really mature of him. That was really kind of him. That was really thoughtful of him to do that. And listen, I won't even say as luck would have it, as is abilities would have it, as is skills would have it, as is determination would have it, as is Jamaican blood would have it. He picked that ball up from around the halfway line or somewhere close to the halfway line. And he just took it on to himself and scored a peach of a goal to get the goal that he, gave up.
Yeah, and see that I thought that was great for him, and I have to ask you this question because for what he did, it was selfless, to give soccer the opportunity when he could have taken it for himself. Let's talk about individual glory versus team glory, because there are some players, they're thinking about breaking the records. They're thinking about their individual glory instead of thinking about the good of the team. How important is it to be able to separate the two? There are times, go for it. But if you know in your heart that it's better to think about the team in certain moments, I mean, how important is it to be able to separate the two?
Well, you have to, because it's a team sports, number one, right?
Yes.
As we're talking and watching some of the highlights of some of the goals that were scored throughout the tournament, breathtaking stuff. But to answer that question directly, my queen sister, you have to separate that, and if that happens, if it comes along, and it normally does come along for the great players, right? Because the great players are usually the focal point of the team. Right, yeah. Players chasing a record are chasing a record for a reason, because they're good at what they do. They're consistent at what they do. Their teammates and their coaches put them in a position to be able to do what they are good at doing on a regular basis, which is why they're chasing a record in the first place. But I don't know that any person or any team or coach walk out on the field saying, "I'm going to get a record." It's not track and field, where Usain Bolt or the young man that just broke the the 1 mile record. Saying, "Look, I'm going to go for this record today." I don't think football players go out like that, right? We go out knowing that, hey, if I score another goal, I'm breaking the record. Yeah, that is true. We know that. But I don't think players, for example, when we watch Bruno Fernandes chase the assist record in the Premier League just ended, it was becoming quite obvious where he was in positions where he could have scored a goal, but it seemed like it mattered more to him to pass it to somebody else to score the goal so he gets this.
Yeah.
And it looked a bit silly.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to take anything away from the fact that he had 21 assists, right, and beat the record. But the point I'm making is that you are in that position because of your ability and consistency over time. Right. Yes. And that will come out naturally in the way the game is being played. So a player, Mbappe, for example, and Messi chasing these golden boot and Haaland and Kane, they're forward players. They're forward players who score goals anyway, who normally score goals, who the focal point of the team's attack are going through them. So they're more than likely going to be the ones to score the goals anyway. Right. So we're not coming out thinking, okay, Kane, you're going to get this record today. Right. But we are going to put you in the position to score the goals, because you scoring the goals means the team win.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know that the individual accolades are the forefront. And maybe I'm not speaking for all players, so because maybe there's a player or a few players who selfishly have that in the thought process. But I don't know that is the focal point or anything that we're focusing on doing, as opposed to what's best for the team.
Yeah. Now, I'd like you to address, now that the World Cup has come to an end, the 2026 World Cup, there were 48 teams that came out, 47 teams went home without, winning the cup. Only one team, as you said it in a previous episode. Do players walk away happy with the experience? Well, you know what, we didn't win the cup, but I got to play on the world stage. I got to experience a World Cup. And do you think most of the players, whether they win the cup or not, it's about making it to the World Cup? It's about representing their country.
Well, I'm gonna get technical here. Most of the players, yes. And the reason I say that is because most of the players probably realistically didn't have a chance to win the World Cup. Right? Most of the players.
Yes.
So that statement is probably true for most of the players. However, when you think, for example, when you listen to how, say, the England and the France players and commentators and media were after the game last night, even though we just referenced the game, how beautiful of a game it was to watch, there is still that aura of disappointment around both sets of players, right? Like it's an
Yes.
opportunity missed, right? Both sets of players and coaching staff and fans came into this World Cup thinking that they had a really good chance of winning this
Yes.
World Cup. So for those players, they would be going through a sense of disappointment right now. Eventually, I'm sure they'll get to a place where, you know, they decompress and reflect and say, okay, you know what, we did really, really well out of 48 teams. You know, we were fourth and third respectively. But right now, they're not happy about that. Right
Yeah.
now, Argentina isn't happy that they fell short.
Yeah.
Afterwards they'll go and say, you know what, we gave it our best shot. You know, we managed to play in 3 straight World Cup finals. They'll think about it like that after the fact. But they're certainly not happy right now. You know, the only people happy right now are Spain. You know,
Yeah.
and the players from, say, maybe Cape Verde or, you know, Curacao
Yes.
or, you know, Uzbekistan or Jordan, you know, teams that, you know, probably didn't think they were going to be playing in the World Cup and had a chance to play in the World Cup. And, you know, probably even made it out of their group when they probably didn't expect to get a point. Those players will generally be happy. Yes, I experienced the World Cup. I played in the World Cup. I know what it feels like. You know, it was a great experience for me. I could put it on my resume now. Now I could probably get a bigger contract. Those players, there are a lot of them. Yes. But the ones who were expected to win and expected to, you know, go far in the tournament and didn't.
Yeah.
Germany, for example. I mean, Kai Havertz isn't sitting there thinking, oh, well, I played in the World Cup. No, they were expected to win. You
Yeah.
know, the Netherlands players, you know, they're not sitting there, you know, the Belgian players, these teams who are prominently the bigger teams that go further into tournaments, they're looking at this thinking it's a disappointment.
Now, teams like Morocco and Egypt, who showed, great potential in the World Cup. And, I know for Egypt, they took it hard when they lost that game to Argentina. Does that create a hunger and, fire in the belly that they're going to go back and work even harder for the next World Cup? Because after that game, I was very disappointed for Egypt. And, I said to myself, I hope they don't allow this loss to become a distraction. And, because it's easy to become bitter in situations like that. And I'm hoping that they could see that they did a great job and, just focus on the next cup. What's your take on that?
You know, sis, the players will feel that way, right? But and I kind of alluded to it earlier, and I don't want us to lose sight of this. And I really want to make this point, and anyone listening, especially if anyone listening from the Jamaica Football Federation or even the African federations or these lesser teams from the CONCACAF regions federations, we have to think broader than that. We have to be able to see a fuller picture than a 4-year cycle. Yes, we want to come back better next year, but we have to have so let's take, for example, the two teams that we just witnessed in the final.
Mm-hmm.
These two coaches, right, Lionel Scaloni from Argentina and De La Fuente of Spain, they are probably the two coaches who at the very least club experience coaching at top level clubs, right? And Scaloni makes the point that De La Fuentes of Spain is his mentor. When he started his coaching back, De La Fuentes was his mentor. He made the point, he taught him everything he knows, right? And I'm saying that to say, when we talk about the England-France game, right, everybody's on Tuchel for the substitutions that he made. Now we could say similar thing for Argentina's coach, albeit some of this was forced upon him because defenders were getting injured and he had to be making more defensive changes than. But the greater point that I want to get to here is the fact that the resources that they have at their disposal, the machinery that's in place, the players that they're turning out. So, for example, Rodri came off the field. Aymeric Laporte came off the field. Now that's your best central midfielder and your best central defender, your captain, and they've been keeping the best part of your team intact, right? Your solid defensive part of your team intact, and you took them off. but you replace them with who? Martin Zubimendi, Eric Garcia, right? Two very capable and able players. So the point that I'm making here is that we can't just be looking at what to do in the next World Cup. We have to be looking at more so what Morocco has been doing, right, over the last decade or so. Where do we want to end up eventually? And how do we end up there? Do we, as a small nation or a lesser expected nation to make noise in the World Cup, want to get to a space where in 20 years we can get to the quarterfinal of the World Cup? Okay, what does that look like in 20 years, right? So I want my kids who are now 4 years old to be playing in that World Cup when they're 24 years old. So the focus is going to be on these kids when they're 4 years old.
Yes.
How do I want these kids to be playing when they're 24 years old, at 4 years old? Okay, we have natural ability, right? We know how to swing our hips. So it gives us an advantage with our skills. So if we make them comfortable with the football, couple that with the speed that they have, the natural ability to be agile and flexible and sway those hips, right? So we're building that from then at 4 years old, giving them good pitches to be able to play that on. So everywhere a kid walks in is coming in, well, not everywhere, but available pitches, good pitches. When we start to talk about coaching education, coach the coaches to coach the kids in this way, so that when these kids get to 7 years old and they're playing football, they are playing real football. Football with an understanding of how to manipulate the ball, football with an understanding of how to make decisions that gets you in a better position.
Yes.
Where if there is a blockage in front of you or a line beside you that you can't dribble out of, I could turn it and find my next best option. Teach kids to be able to make those decisions while manipulating the ball. Then when it gets to a space where you can start introducing the tactics into the game, right? Have coaches understand that. What type of tactics we want to introduce, right? What kind of understanding we want the kids to have of the tactics. And that is your focus. Not on winning this game and beating this school and beating that school, but educating the kids that way, educating the coaches that way to take ourselves out of the equation as well. Because a lot of times we make it about us. So once that starts to become the case, right? And you've seen, like we talk about the Olympics, these same kids now, they're amateurs. They're playing schoolboy football. After schoolboy football, then what? The next gap can't be the national team. There's got to be something in between. So is that the Olympics? Maybe it is. So now the 23 competition. So maybe people are looking to that.
Now, has Jamaica ever played in the Olympics?
Football, no.
Okay, I was about to say I don't recall seeing them. Okay.
No. So these are things that I think we should be more focused on than just coming back for the next round.
I agree. Because
it's been a bitter disappointment since 1998. Save for the women. Since 1998, the men's team has not qualified for another World Cup.
Yeah.
We had a couple of youth teams qualified for New Zealand in 1999 and Argentina in 2021, I believe, right? And a few others. My brother's team fell short, a few years back, losing to the US on penalty shootout. But we've not had any continuity because there's nothing to continue on to. We stop and then we start again.
Yeah.
I saw Ricardo Gardner's kid is now invited to play on the national under 20 team of Jamaica. I'm like, this is how we're supposed to do it from the kids are young.
Yeah.
Right? We're supposed to start owning these kids, their skills, culturalize them in an environment where they grow up and know each other. De La Fuente know these Spain players from they were playing in Spain's youth team.
Yeah.
He was their coach at youth team level. That's continuity, not of just even the players, but also of the coach.
Yeah.
That's a system with a machinery in place that's always going to work.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how much fire we come back with in our belly from Egypt or Morocco or, Ivory Coast or Jamaica or Curacao or Cape Verde next 4 years. It's going to be just for that next 4 years. And then we have to think about the next 4 years and go and rebuild again. So I think we have to start look long-term, plan long-term, and build to meet those long-term goals.
It would definitely be a good thing to see something like that, like what you're talking about. But it seems to me that the people in the positions of power are not talking to the people who have an understanding of what needs to be done.
That is definitely quite the case. Definitely the case. And, part of the reason being for that is selfishness, right? As a leader, you can't be selfish. It can't just be about you. Right? You have to surround yourself with the people with the knowledge, the people with the ability, and the people who, That's why people like Marcus Garvey were so great leaders. That's why people like Traore is doing so great right now, because these people aren't about themselves. We do this with track and field, Bree.
Yeah.
Right? We have been churning out track and field athletes. We have a conveyor belt of track and field athletes.
Yeah, it's true.
Why is that? We can do the same thing with football, right?
I agree.
When you go to a basic school track and field meet in Jamaica, the excitement level that these parents have in their little kids running, right? Some of these kids can't even run properly without tripping over themselves. But they've been doing that since basic school, from their 4 and 5 years old, right? If we create that aura, that atmosphere, that environment around football, and those kids, they make it into the Olympics.
Yeah.
Same football trajectory can, and in my opinion, should be there. And we should be targeting these amateur global events, including the Olympics. It's still a global event. It's still an opportunity at a global title.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I have to say to you that I've really enjoyed doing these podcasts, throughout this World Cup. It's been a lot of fun. I reached out to you to ask you, would you like us to do this when the Premier League starts? And I'm so glad that you would like to do it, because it's been a lot of fun. And I've been learning a lot from you and your brother. Like, I don't have the trained eye that you have, but you've helped me to have a better understanding of the game. And I love that. So, do you have any closing thoughts? And once again, I have to thank you and your brother, Coach Andrew.
My queen sister, I think I mentioned to you yesterday or the day before, I was talking to my guide and North Star, the one that helped to train my eyes and my brain to the game the way they are trained. That is Dr. Iman Black, football coach Don Davis, or Don D. And he mentioned the fact that we probably should have a show about this that's looking at the overall staging of this World Cup. And I would like to be able to do that with you.
Yes, definitely. You guys give me a date. I would love to.
But, when I think of what I would like to say in closing here, my queen sister, like even just this show, there's a lot that is packed onto it, a lot of missed opportunities, right? We talk about the highs and lows, and most of the talking points that will go on have nothing to do with the football that's played on the field.
Yes.
Sadly for me, the last game wasn't the spark that we were looking for, and I can understand it, because neither team wanted to lose that game.
That's true.
And there's a lot of pressure on those teams. Argentina came into the game having played a whole lot more than Spain, with aged legs. I mean, their leaders, one of the oldest player in the tournament. So there was a lot that contributed to the game not being as fiery. I mean, the England-France game yesterday was more open. There was less on the line. People were playing with more freedom. So we could see that and understand that. But one of the things I don't want to be lost here is because, for example, like Spain got presented their trophy. And, I wonder how many of those Spain players will look back later on and like, wow, I wish this wasn't the scenario under which I was presented this trophy. Like, for example, my high school diploma from Titchfield wasn't signed by Lido Chen, who was my principal at Titchfield. And the minute I get that certificate in my hand, I can't tell you to this day what happened to it or where it is, because it just didn't feel right to me.
No, I get it.
I don't recognize the signature that's on my my certificate, because Lloyd Ochin is my principal, is my North Star, is my guide. Right?
Oh my gosh, what a wonderful headmaster.
So some things just taint what is meant to be such a beautiful thing. This is meant to be something that we walk away and talk about. Like, I could still go back and reference the Qatar World Cup, because with all the controversy that surrounded that World Cup prior to it starting, once the games got going, it was about the football. And the football is beautiful, including the final game between France and Argentina.
Yes.
This World Cup cannot say that. A lot of that has lost.
There was so much that we could have done without, but and I have to say to the viewers, the show that I was supposed to start at 7 will be starting shortly. So, you know, we had a late start because we wanted to finish watching the World Cup and all of that. So, you know, I'm looking forward to you coming back, Richie. And like I said, you know, the topics that you would like to, because, you know, I also like to learn about the game, and I'm sure there are viewers out there that would like to learn about the game. And I'm sure that you'll be a great source of information for us.
Almost definitely. I'm looking forward to it, my queen sister. And, you know, thank you again for the time. Thank to you, to your wonderful audience for, you know, putting up with me. And I
it's
just
been
always
great.
want to say, it's up to me. So when things around you are not kind, you can still be kind.
Yes.
So that's the closing thought I want to leave this World Cup with. You know, we're grateful for the football, grateful to see so many of our African brothers and sisters strutting their stuff, you know, our brothers and sisters from, you know, Curacao and these lesser nations who, you know, came to the party and showed up and did really well. We're happy to see that. You know, apologies to our brothers and sisters with all the oppression that they had to suffer and face. But in our own arts, in our own behavior, we can be better, we can do better, and we should. I applaud you and I implore you. Thank you, my queen sister.
Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon. And to the viewers, I'll be tuning right in for the second episode for tonight. Take care, Richie. We'll talk soon.
Okay, my queen sister.
All right. Bye.